Hello, my name is Samuel Orta, and in today's podcast, I will be discussing the life and the musical influence of the classical composer Chevalier de Saint-Georges. I chose this topic because Chevalier de Saint-Georges was a composer that I was not originally familiar with. Once I studied him a little bit, I became very interested by his life and his legacy. In this podcast, I will argue how Chevalier de Saint-Georges was a classical composer who had an essential influence on the development of music, as he is renowned as the first classical composer with African ancestry. He was originally born with the name Joseph Boulogne in the year 1745 on the island of Guadeloupe to a French colonialist and his mistress who was a slave. When he was 7 years old, his father moved his family to France, where he was able to receive an education and grow up in an aristocratic environment. During his teenage years, he proved himself to be a gifted athlete as both a fencer and a boxer. He worked his way up in the eyes of the high French society, and he was able to graduate in 1766 from the Royal Academy, where he officially became known as Chevalier de Saint-Georges. It was at this point in his life where he used his status and his reputation to pursue music. Perhaps his most influential teacher was François Gossec, who took him under his wing at this time. By the year 1769, Saint-Georges was appointed concertmaster of the Concert des Amateurs. We know that this doesn't mean that the ensemble was literally made up of amateurs, rather it was performed by people who just found enjoyment playing music. During his time with this ensemble, he performed Symphonie concertantes by Gossec and Stamitz. Symphonie concertantes are concerto-like works that feature at least two soloists. The solo lines of these works are known for being very difficult to perform, so this gave Saint-Georges many opportunities to display his virtuosity. His virtuosity became apparent as he used his knowledge of how to play the violin to compose several violin concertos and symphony concertantes, which contain difficult violin passages that are difficult for violinists to play even to this day. His concertos feature quick technical 16th note passages along with embellished melodic lines that show off the soloist's virtuosity. He was known for being close to Queen Marie Antoinette, and he taught her music for a time. He also wished to become the director of the Paris Opera, but he was unfortunately not offered this position due to racist remarks coming from some of the opera performers to the Queen. However, he is famous for conducting at least the 6 Paris symphonies, which he commissioned Joseph Haydn to compose. He also had a direct influence on other composers at the time. For example, it is known that Mozart took a violin passage from his violin concerto E major and used it in his Symphonie concertante in E flat major. Though they may not have seen eye to eye, the influence these composers had on each other was quite apparent. Following the peak of his music career, Saint-Georges served as a colonel in the French Revolution. He worked with abolitionists and fought for equality, and he was even imprisoned due to his aristocratic status. He was, however, eventually released. In the year 1799, at the age of 53, he passed away due to gangrene. Chevalier de Saint-Georges was a very prominent musician in France in the late 18th century. He was an accomplished violinist, composer, conductor, and he was very popular among aristocrats. He also had a direct influence on other composers during his time, such as Mozart. Unfortunately, Saint-Georges isn't talked about as much as some of the other composers from this time, such as Mozart or Haydn. Perhaps this can be attributed to some of his work being lost due to the French Revolution. Regardless, it is important for us as musicians and scholars to take the time and effort to learn about these influential people, especially someone as important as the first classical composer of African descent, who John Adams referred to as the most accomplished man in Europe.